What is going on, guys? I am back today for some more summertime fun. And I just released a video recently talking about some of my favorite summer movies and movies that kind of embody the spirit of summer and everything that gets people excited about the summertime. Well, today I thought I would do the opposite and talk about summer horror movies and films that take place during the summertime, oftentimes in broad daylight, which there's something about horror movies that can occur during the broad daylight that is absolutely horrible and horrific, and that make it all the more scary when things aren't creeping in the shadows and they're just out there right in front of you. And it's something I can really respect when directors can kind of take that approach. Today, I'm going to talk about some horror films that take place during or around the summertime. So let's get into them right now. So, first up is Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is one of the probably quintessential summertime horror movies. A lot of this takes place during the daylight, which makes it absolutely horrific. This movie is one of the most unsettling and uncomfortable horror films I've ever seen, and the reason for that is it feels very real. The way that it's shot, it's almost documentary-esque, which makes it so uncomfortable. It's like you're watching something that you shouldn't be watching. I feel like for the time period this takes place in as well, there's such great attention to detail and the practical effects and the gore in this movie that make it so immersive and easy to be invested in. The characters aren't the most likable. Like for a lot of slasher movies, I feel like I'm not nearly as invested in the characters. But because the world and the environment is so well fleshed out and the way that this thing is shot, it's so impossible to look away. It's really easy to stay invested for the entire runtime of the movie. And this is a classic for a reason. Everything that can be said about this has been said, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be continued to be said. It's an incredible movie. I'm not sure why an entire franchise spawned out of it because it didn't need to, but this movie is just incredible as a standalone. Up next, and you could pick a wide variety of movies from this franchise, but I'm going to choose Friday the 13th Part 2. Obviously, a lot of the earlier films of this franchise take place at a summer camp, so you could pick pretty much anyone, but I think Friday the 13th Part 2 perfectly embodies that summertime feeling. This would be a perfect slasher movie, in my opinion, if the first 15 minutes wasn't just a rehash of the first movie. But everything that comes to play after that is incredible. This probably is some of my favorite characters in any of the Friday the 13th movies. This is before Jason even spawns the mask. This is where he wears the burlap sack over his head. This has some of the most inventive kills in the entire series, probably the most likable final girl in the entirety of the series as well. This has the one wheelchair kill, which is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in a movie. You can just tell there was a lot of attention to detail in all of the little moments in this film, and it's incredibly enjoyable. And I love the Friday the 13th series because it makes no logical sense, like how Jason was killed as a kid but somehow spawns into this big burly guy, and every time he dies he comes back stronger. I mean, it doesn't really make any sense, but that's what makes it so much fun to watch. And I love watching these movies around the summertime and around the fall. I just feel like they're so much fun. Don't take them too seriously. They're just a great time. Up next is one of my favorite horror franchises of all time, but the first film in it, and that is Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead. And some people might say this doesn't necessarily feel like a summertime movie because there's leaves. It feels it takes place in the woods. It might feel a little bit more like fall. We're on a vacation together during the summertime, okay? I'm gonna use it as an excuse. I love this movie. Obviously, it doesn't all take place in the bright daylight. It's obviously not as overt as like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I'm using the fact that they go on this vacation as a reason to talk about it. This is one of my favorite series of films. Evil Dead 2 is my absolute favorite, but that one feels a lot more like fall. This movie just has really fun characters that are goofy and over the top. This is before Bruce Campbell really was Bruce Campbell in this franchise. I love all the practical effects in this movie. They're very over the top. They're very silly. I love how sadistic the Deadites are in this movie. Like, they have moments that are really comedic, but they also have some moments that are truly and really horrific that just kind of send chills up your spine. And it's such an amazing movie that I cannot believe that Sam Raimi made for such a cheap budget. Like, I'm always really surprised that he was able to pull off the amount that he did with the limited amount of money that he had. And it's a film I think about all the time. I always go back and revisit it and grow to love it more every time I watch it again. A film I've talked about quite a few times on this channel, and that is Sleepaway Camp, one of my favorite slasher movies that is another one you can't take too seriously. It's really ridiculous and over the top. The performances are really hammy and absurd, but I love the creativeness of this movie. A lot of the kills are through the POV perspective, which I honestly think work to the film's benefit. There's some really cool practical effects sequences. There are a couple of off-camera kills that I think work better than others. And I've seen this movie multiple times, and the third act is ridiculous. If you've never seen it before, don't look anything up about this movie before you watch it. The third act will leave your jaw on the floor. I honestly could not believe what I was watching the first time I saw it. And this ended up spawning a series of sequels, but the first movie is such a great standalone film that perfectly encapsulates that summer camp vibe. I've seen this movie so many times and I'd watch it 100 more. It's just so much fun. Up next, getting a little more recent, is the film It Follows. This takes place during the summertime, and it's truly one of the most horrific horror movies I've ever seen. The idea of this creature consistently following you until you are dead, the level of anxiety and dread that brings me just thinking about is ridiculous. I love the performances in this. Micah Monroe is one of the most underappreciated actresses in all of horror, and I feel like she continues to deliver amazing performances in every film that she shows up in. And I hate that her roles aren't talked about more because she's just so incredible. This movie has some really horrific imagery. I love the ambiguity of the time period of the film. There's so many different things from different eras incorporated in this movie that it's impossible to kind of just peg down when it takes place, which I think is super cool. It's a film that every time I've revisited it, I've grown to love it more, and I'm honestly really excited they're making a sequel. Up next is another recent horror film, and that is Ty West's X, another brilliant summertime slasher movie. I love this movie so much because Ty West pays homage to what makes all the great 70s slasher films great, but he also does his completely own unique thing with it. I think that it's a brilliant commentary on the sex work industry, on ageism. There's all these really interesting elements incorporated throughout the movie, and the performances are all fantastic. Every actor and actress in this movie brings so much life to the film and brings so much enjoyment to the movie as a whole. And I cannot wait for Maxine here in a few weeks. I love Pearl as well. I just can't believe Ty West has made these movies so close together because they're all so amazing, and I have a feeling Maxine is going to be as well. This one may be a little bit more questioned by you whether or not you consider this horror. I do. Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool that was released last year, I consider this a horror movie. It's also kind of like a sci-fi suspense thriller that takes place during a summer vacation. I love this movie so much. It's very much like one of those Eat the Rich movies. It has a really interesting concept that I don't want to talk about too much if you've never seen it before, because it's really shocking and surprising when things happen in this movie. Mia Goth gives another unhinged performance that is just absolutely incredible. All the performances in this movie are great. The horror, like the body horror element of the film, is fantastic. There's some truly horrific imagery in this film, some really fantastic surrealist moments that just keep you hooked and engaged to the screen. Brandon Cronenberg is one of the most exciting directors working right now, and I cannot wait for whatever he makes next. And then the last film on this list, you're probably not surprised at all that I chose this, but Ari Aster's Midsommar, arguably one of the greatest summertime horror films ever made. I love how much of this takes place during the broad daylight. As I said early in the video, there's something about horror that takes place in the middle of the day that is so much more terrifying than when things are in the shadows at nighttime. And there are so many incredible sequences in this movie. This is one of the few films I really pay compliment to the CGI, and I feel like it actually helps the movie because of all the drug trip kind of like sequences that occur there. There's so many stunning images in this. Florence Pugh delivers a phenomenal performance. It's a film that really looks at grief and loss and coping with loss in such a unique way, and I love that Ari takes these very dark concepts associated with familial trauma and brings them to life in a horror environment. This is a film that I never stop thinking about, and I cannot wait to watch it again. So what are some of your favorite summertime horror films? Let me know in the comments. This is just some of the ones that I could mention, and as always, I can make a part 2 of this if you enjoyed it. As always, if you like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.